The cabin didn't catch fire by accident. It was meant to burn. Someone poured gasoline along the walls, struck a match, and walked away, knowing a woman was tied to a bed inside. Her mouth taped shut, her hands bound, left to die in silence. But God had another plan, because somewhere in that frozen darkness, a Navy SEAL who had lost everything, and the only friend he had left, a German shepherd with battle scars of his own, were already moving toward the flames. If you believe God still sends help when hope runs out, subscribe and follow this story to the very end. And tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from tonight? Let's see how far this story travels. Colton Briggs hadn't spoken to another human being in 9 days. He counted. Not because he was proud of it, but because counting was the only discipline he had left. 9 days since the last supply run into town. 9 days since the woman at the general store had said, "Have a nice day," and he'd nodded without answering, because his voice had rusted shut somewhere between deployment number 3 and the funeral he couldn't attend. He sat on the porch of his cabin with a mug of coffee going cold in his bare hand. He wasn't drinking it. He was holding it because holding something kept his fingers from curling into fists, and fists led to walls, and walls led to explanations he didn't want to give to anyone, least of all himself. 30 years old, and already living like a man who'd used up his reasons. Ranger sat beside him. The German shepherd was 7, which in dog years meant he'd earned every gray hair frosting his muzzle. Black saddle across his back, gold-brown legs and chest, one ear that tilted slightly, bent during a breach in Helmand Province, and never quite corrected. Ranger didn't care. He wore it the way Colton wore his scars, without apology and without discussion. They'd served 3 deployments together. Ranger had cleared compounds, detected IEDs, and once held a doorway for 40 seconds while Colton dragged a bleeding teammate across a courtyard that smelled like copper and prayer. When Colton left the teams, he fought harder to bring Ranger home than he'd fought for anything in his life, including his own discharge paperwork. Now they sat in silence on a porch in the Cascade Wilderness, 2 soldiers with nowhere left to report. Ranger's head lifted. Colton noticed immediately. Not the casual alertness of a dog hearing a squirrel. This was operational. Shoulders dropping, neck extending, tail locked rigid. A low sound rolled from the dog's chest. Not a growl, not a bark. Something older than either. "What is it?" Colton murmured. Ranger didn't look back. He listened. Then Colton heard it too. A vibration beneath the wind. Wrong frequency, wrong rhythm. Mechanical. Struggling. He knew that sound. The sick thrum of a machine fighting itself. An engine losing an argument with gravity. His mug hit the porch rail. Coffee sloshed and steamed. A small aircraft broke through a gap in the treetops, moving too low and too wrong. The right side glowed orange. Not reflection. Not moonlight on metal. Fire. Sustained, hungry, clinging to the wing like it had been invited. No storm. No lightning. The sky was clean. That made it worse. Ranger howled, long, mournful, absolute. Not excitement. Witness. The aircraft banked, corrected twice, then dipped behind the northern tree line as if a hand had pulled it down. Silence followed. Too perfect. Too held. Then a boom punched through the ground and up through Colton's boots. Snow fell from high branches in soft sheets like the forest was covering its eyes. Colton stood frozen for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all the ghosts needed. A different night. A different shouldn't have happened. Kandahar. The helicopter spinning. The sound that came after. Metal screaming, then nothing, then a silence that lasted the rest of his life. Ranger hit his thigh. Hard. Not a nudge. A command. Move. Colton exhaled, and his body woke up the way it used to. Fast. Complete. No room for argument. He grabbed the flashlight and the first aid kit from the shelf inside the door. He pulled on gloves. He tightened his jacket. The NWU Type 3, digital camo, greens and browns, because he hadn't owned civilian outerwear in 11 months and hadn't bothered to buy any. Ranger paced once by the door, nails clicking, then froze. Ready. Colton looked back at the cabin. Lamp glow, half-split wood by the stove. The quiet life he'd built like a wall between himself and the world. "I came here to be left alone," he said to no one. The forest answered with the smell of smoke. He opened the door and the cold hit him like a slap. Ranger shot forward. Colton followed, boots breaking the snow, each breath turning white in front of his face. The trees swallowed them within 100 yards, branches closing overhead, turning everything into shadow and frost. The deeper they went, the more the air changed. Pine gave way to burned fuel, scorched metal, and something else. Sharp and human and unmistakable. Fear. Fresh. Not his. Ranger slowed at a rise and looked back, checking. Colton nodded once. "Okay," he whispered, and tried to pretend his voice wasn't shaking. The burning cabin emerged from the trees 20 minutes later, and Colton's stomach turned to ice. Not wreckage. A structure. Low timber walls. Flames climbing with an appetite that felt practiced, fed, not accidental. The smell of gasoline hit him before the heat did. Sharp. Deliberate. A confession the wind hadn't meant to carry. He'd seen this before. Not the fire. The intention. Clean lines of burn. Accelerant laid with purpose. Someone had wanted this fast, hot, and quiet. Ranger circled once, then locked onto the back door. Short, urgent barks, the ones he only used when the problem was alive and running out of time. Then the dog sat. Colton's chest tightened. Ranger only sat like that when he was certain. When the question had resolved into a fact. Something was inside. Something breathing. "No," Colton said, but he was already moving. He hit the door with his shoulder. It held for one heartbeat, then cracked inward. Smoke poured out like something that had been caged. Heat slapped his face. He dropped low, pulled his collar over his mouth, and went in. Visibility? 0. He moved by touch, counting steps, reading walls with his fingertips. The cabin was sparse. No photographs, barely any furniture. A place used but not lived in. A staging ground. A closed door on the left. He tested it with the back of his hand. Hot, but not blistering. Behind it, vibration. Faint. Irregular. A heartbeat refusing to quit. He kicked. The latch tore free. Rope. That's what he saw first. Pale coils pulled taut around a metal bed frame, darkened by soot. And on the bed, a woman. Wrists bound, ankles tied. Mouth sealed with gray tape. Chest heaving in shallow, desperate pulls. Her eyes found him through the smoke. Wide, fierce, not panicking, enduring. Colton dropped beside her. His knife was out before his next breath. He cut the tape first. She gasped, coughed, gasped again. Then the ropes, talking low and steady the whole time. "Breathe. Stay still. I've got you. Count with me. 3, 2... Ranger surged through the door behind him. The dog pressed his body against the woman's other side, warm, solid. A wall between her and the embers raining from the ceiling. She coughed, deep, wet, tearing, then pulled in a breath that sounded like something stolen back from death. "Can you stand?" Colton asked. She tried. Her legs buckled. He caught her, slung her arm over his shoulder, and took her weight. She was lighter than she looked, muscle, not bulk, but her body shook in waves she couldn't control. A beam cracked above them. Fire roared where the ceiling used to be. "We're going," Colton said. "Now!" He turned them toward the hall. 3 steps. 5. The front door was a rectangle of cold air and starlight, and he drove toward it like it was the last exit in the world. They broke through into the snow. Cold wrapped around them like mercy. Colton staggered, found his footing, kept moving. Ranger flanked them, teeth bared at the darkness, daring the night to try again. 30 yards from the cabin, Colton lowered her against a fallen pine and dropped to a knee. Her face was streaked with soot. Freckles stood out across the bridge of her nose like constellations that refused to be erased. "Name," he said. "Can you tell me your name?"
"Elena," she coughed. "Elena Voss, State Police."
The words weren't a boast. They were a fact. Like blood type. "Who did this to you?" She closed her eyes, opened them, looked directly at him with a clarity that should have been impossible for someone who'd been 30 seconds from burning alive. "My partner," she said. Colton stared. "My partner did this. Deputy Nathan Hale." Ranger's ears flattened, not at her voice, at something behind them. A footstep, careful, deliberate, testing the edge of the clearing they'd just left. Someone checking their work. Elena heard it too. Her hand gripped Colton's wrist. "He'll come back," she said, not a question. "Yes," Colton answered. "You don't understand." Her voice dropped. "He's not alone. And he's wearing a badge." Ranger shifted his weight, alert to coiled. The hair along his spine rose in a dark ridge. Colton pulled Elena closer, angled them toward the trees, and let the shadows take them. Behind, the cabin groaned and caved in on itself, sending a column of sparks into the sky like a signal no one was supposed to see. But Colton had seen it, and he wasn't the kind of man who walked away. Not anymore. They moved through the dark like 2 people sharing the same wound. Colton kept Elena's arm across his shoulder, absorbing her stumbles without slowing. She was tougher than her body wanted to admit. He felt it in the way she corrected her own balance, the way she swallowed pain instead of voicing it. But her breathing was wrong, shallow, rattling. Smoke had done its work inside her lungs, and the cold was finishing the job. Ranger ran point 10 yards ahead, nose low, tail level, choosing ground by instinct and training. Every 30 seconds the dog paused, tested the air, then adjusted their path. Always toward thicker cover, always away from the direction the footsteps had come from. "How many?" Colton asked without turning his head. Elena took 2 breaths before answering.
3 that I know. Nathan, a big one, older, hands like a brawler. And a younger guy, quiet, does what he's told.
"Armed?"
Nathan carries his service weapon everywhere. The other 2, I don't know.
Colton filed it. 3 men, at least 1 gun confirmed. Badge authority that could call in backup and make it look legitimate. In terrain the enemy had chosen. He'd faced worse odds, but not with a wounded civilian on his shoulder and no comms. "Why?" he said. The single word carried everything. Elena's jaw tightened. He felt it through his shoulder. A vibration of rage held in check by discipline.
"Because I wouldn't stop looking."
She coughed once, winced, then continued.
18 months ago, a house fire killed a family of 4 outside Ridgefield. Ruled electrical. Case closed in 9 days. I pulled the file because something bothered me. The homeowner had just increased his insurance.
The adjuster signed off without a site visit, and the responding deputy who wrote the initial report was Nathan. Colton said nothing. Silence was an invitation, and Elena accepted it. So I dug. Found another fire 14 months before that. Same pattern. Rural property, electrical ruling, insurance payout. Different adjuster, but same contractor handled the demolition. Then a third fire. A fourth. Going back 6 years. Always rural, always isolated, always clean. And always Nathan's name on the paperwork, Colton said. Not always, but enough. He rotated with 2 other deputies, kept it spread out, kept it looking random. But the contractor was the same every time. And the adjusters came from a pool of 3 people who all lived within 40 miles of each other. She stopped walking, not from exhaustion, from the weight of what came next. 2 weeks ago, I found a witness, a woman named Diane Calloway. She'd been renting one of the properties before it burned. She told me she saw men pouring something along the foundation the night before the fire. She said one of them was wearing a deputy's jacket. Where is she now? Elena's silence answered before her voice did. She left town, changed her number. Her landlord said she seemed scared. Elena paused. I think Nathan got to her first. Not to hurt her, to make her understand what would happen if she talked. Ranger stopped ahead of them. His body went rigid, ears high, weight forward. Colton halted immediately and eased Elena down against a rock. He crouched beside the dog and listened. Voices. Distant but organized. 2 distinct tones. One low and controlled, one higher, anxious. Moving parallel to them along a ridge, maybe 200 yards east. They're sweeping, Colton whispered. Nathan knows this forest, Elena said. He hunts here every fall. He picked that cabin for a reason. The words landed hard. Colton reassessed everything. This wasn't a chase through unfamiliar terrain. This was Nathan's ground. Every advantage Colton thought he had, darkness, tree cover, distance, Nathan had already accounted for. Then we don't play his game, Colton said. He changed direction. Instead of running downhill toward the distant highway, he turned them upslope toward higher ground where the wind blew harder and tracks disappeared faster. It was brutal on Elena's body. He knew it. But survival sometimes meant choosing the pain you could manage over the death you couldn't. Elena didn't complain. She gritted her teeth and climbed. 20 minutes later, they reached a granite shelf where the wind scoured snow down to bare rock. No footprints, no trail. Colton settled Elena beneath an overhang and checked her injuries properly for the first time. Her left shoulder sagged wrong, dislocated or badly strained. Her wrists were raw, rope burns deep enough to weep. A bruise, shaped like fingers, wrapped her right forearm. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave a signature. He set me up, Elena said while Colton worked. Her voice was steadier now. Anger was doing what adrenaline couldn't sustain. Called me 2 days ago. Said a source had documents, bank records, transfer receipts, stashed in that cabin. Said the source would only hand them to me in person. And you went alone. I went alone because I didn't know who else was compromised. She looked at him. Every lead I followed, someone got there first. Files missing from the evidence room. My request logs accessed by someone with deputy clearance. I stopped trusting the office 6 months ago. Colton tore a strip from his undershirt and fashioned a sling, working gently around her shoulder. She hissed once, but held still. When I got to the cabin, she continued, the power was already out. I should have turned around. I knew it was wrong the second I stepped inside. But I'd spent 18 months chasing this, and I was tired of being careful. What happened? He came from behind, didn't say a word, just rope, tape, fast, professional. Her voice dropped. He didn't look at me while he did it. That's what I can't stop thinking about. 18 months as partners. He drove me to the hospital when I broke my wrist on duty. He brought coffee every morning. And he tied me to a bed and set a fire without looking at my face. Colton finished the sling and sat back. He understood something she hadn't said aloud. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was personal. She had trusted Nathan with her life, the way you trust a partner in a squad car at 2 a.m. in a bad neighborhood. And he had answered that trust with gasoline and rope. He poured it himself? Colton asked. I heard the can. I smelled it. Then I heard a match. She paused. Then I heard his truck start. He didn't even wait to watch. Ranger pressed his flank against Elena's knee. She looked down, and something cracked in her composure. Not a breakdown, just a fracture. A thin line of grief cutting through the anger. Hey, she whispered to the dog. Her hand found the back of his neck. Ranger leaned in. Hey, good boy. His tail moved once, restrained, professional. But his eyes stayed on the darkness, guarding what his body was comforting. Colton stood and scanned the slope below. Nothing moved. The voices had faded, but that didn't mean safety. It meant Nathan was regrouping, rethinking. A man who planned fires 6 years deep didn't panic when the first approach failed. We can't go to the station, Elena said. I know. He owns too much of it. Dispatch routes through his radio. Half the night shift plays poker at his house. If I walk into that building, I'm the confused smoke inhalation victim who wandered into the woods and made up stories. Then we don't go to the station. Where? Colton looked at Ranger. The dog met his eyes. 7 years of partnership lived in that look. Every breach, every clearing, every night when the plan fell apart and the only thing left was trust. High ground, Colton said. Cell signal. We go over his head. Elena nodded slowly. Then she said something that changed the shape of the night. My phone. Colton waited. Nathan took it when he tied me. But he's smart. He wouldn't destroy it. Too much on it that he'd want to control. He'd keep it somewhere close. Insurance. Like he keeps everything else. Exactly like that. Colton processed it. A phone with 18 months of investigation. Contacts, photos, notes. If Nathan had it, and they could take it back, it wasn't just a phone. It was a detonator that could bring down everything he'd built. You know what this means, Colton said. Elena met his eyes. We can't just run. No. We have to go toward him. Ranger's ears rotated forward. His body shifted. Not tension, but readiness. The difference between a dog hearing a threat and a dog hearing a mission. The wind picked up, throwing ice crystals against the rock. Colton pulled his NWU jacket tighter and felt the weight of what he was about to do settle into his bones. 11 months he'd spent running from the world. 9 days since he'd spoken to another human. And now a woman he'd known for less than an hour was asking him to move toward 3 armed men in a forest that belonged to a killer. He looked at Elena. Soot on her face, blood on her wrists, spine straight against the stone. He looked at Ranger, frost on his muzzle, eyes bright, waiting. Colton stood up. Show me where he'd go, he said. Elena pushed herself to her feet. The pain crossed her face and left without permission to stay. There's a logging road, she said, 1/2 mile northeast. Nathan parks there during hunting season. If he's regrouping, that's where. They moved. Not away from the danger this time. Toward it. Ranger took point. His ears were up. His stride was steady. And somewhere in the darkness behind them, a deputy with a badge and a gun was about to discover that the woman he'd left to burn had found something more dangerous than evidence. She'd found someone who had nothing left to lose. The logging road was exactly where Elena said it would be. Colton spotted the tire tracks first.
Fresh, deep, cut into the snow by something heavy. A truck. Recently parked, recently moved. Ranger dropped low the moment they reached the edge, belly nearly touching the ground, ears locked forward like satellite dishes pulling signal from the dark. "There," Elena whispered. A black pickup sat 40 yards ahead, tucked against a stand of birch. Engine off, no lights, but exhaust still ghosted from the tailpipe, which meant it had been running minutes ago. Someone was close. Someone had just stepped out. Colton held up a fist. Ranger froze. They waited. 30 seconds. A minute. The wind carried nothing but cold. Then a voice, thin, nervous, floating from somewhere beyond the truck. "He's not answering. I've called 3 times. The younger one, the follower. Colton marked the direction and distance. 20 yards past the truck, maybe less. A second voice answered, deeper, rougher. "Stop calling. You want a signal trail?" "I want to know the plan, Griggs, because right now we're standing in the freezing dark and that woman is out there with some guy who fights like he's done it before." Griggs. Colton filed the name. The big one. "Nathan said stay on the road, so we stay on the road." "Nathan also said she'd be dead by midnight. It's almost 2. Silence. The kind that meant both men were thinking the same thing, but neither wanted to say it first. Colton leaned close to Elena. "Where would he keep your phone?" "Glove box," she said without hesitation. "Nathan keeps everything in the glove box. Badge duplicates. Burner phone. He once told me he didn't trust pockets because pockets have holes." Colton looked at the truck, then at Ranger, then back at Elena. "Stay here. Don't move. If something goes wrong, head uphill and don't stop until you hit cell signal." "Colton, if I'm not back in 4 minutes, I'm not coming back." Elena grabbed his sleeve, not to stop him, to make him look at her. "Left side of the glove box," she said. "There's a false bottom. He showed it to me once when we were on a stakeout. Thought it was clever. If the phone's anywhere, it's there." He nodded once and moved. Colton covered the 40 yards to the truck in a low crouch that would have looked effortless to anyone watching, but cost him every ounce of control he'd ever trained into his body. He reached the passenger side and pressed himself flat against the door panel. The window was cracked an inch. Nathan's habit, Elena had said, to keep the cab from fogging. And through it, Colton could hear the 2 men arguing somewhere behind the vehicle. "I didn't sign up for a manhunt," the younger one said. His name was Trent. Colton didn't know that yet, but the voice was easy to remember. Reedy, pitched high by fear. "You signed up when you took the money," Griggs answered. "Same as the rest of us. The money was for watching, for looking the other way, not for whatever this turned into." It turned into what it always turns into when someone can't keep their mouth shut. Nathan's handling it. Is he? Because from where I'm standing, Nathan's somewhere in those trees chasing a ghost while we freeze. Colton tried the door handle. Locked. He didn't hesitate. He pulled his knife, slid the blade into the weather seal at the top of the cracked window, and levered it down just far enough to reach the lock with 2 fingers. The mechanism popped with a sound softer than a whisper. He eased the door open. The dome light had been disabled. Another Nathan habit, and one that worked in Colton's favor tonight. He slid across the seat, found the glove box latch, and opened it. Registration? A mag light. 2 spare magazines for a Glock 19. A burner phone, powered off. And beneath all of it, a thin panel of plastic that didn't quite sit flush. Colton pried it up with his knife. Elena's phone. Screen cracked, but intact. Battery at 11%. He pocketed it, closed the glove box, and was halfway back out the door when Ranger barked. Not at him. Behind him. Colton spun. A shape filled the space between the truck and the trees,
Massive, fast, already swinging. Griggs. The big man's fist connected with the side of the truck where Colton's head had been half a second earlier. Metal dented. Griggs swore and lunged again.
Colton dropped low, rolled under the man's reach, and came up on the other side of the door. Griggs was strong, but he moved like a man used to winning by size, not speed. Colton was neither. He was trained, and training meant he didn't need to win. He needed to survive long enough to disappear. Ranger hit Griggs from the side. 70 pounds of muscle and fury slammed into the man's hip and sent him staggering. Griggs kicked. Ranger dodged, not by instinct, but by calculation, the same way he'd dodged worse in tighter spaces, and came back, snapping at the man's calf. "The dog!" Griggs shouted. "Trent, shoot the dog!" Trent appeared from behind the truck, fumbling something from his waistband. His hands were shaking. Colton could see it even in the dark. The kid, because that's what he was, a kid in over his head, raised a pistol with both hands and tried to aim at a moving shadow. Colton didn't give him the chance. He closed the distance in 3 steps, caught Trent's wrist, twisted it inward, and stripped the gun away with a move so fast that Trent was still pulling the trigger on empty air when the weapon left his hand. Colton dropped the magazine, racked the slide to clear the chamber, and tossed the pieces in opposite directions. Trent stumbled backward and fell. He didn't get up. He sat in the snow with his hands raised, chest heaving, eyes wide and wet. "Please," Trent said. I wasn't going to—" "Stay down," Colton said. The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Griggs was back on his feet, one hand on his hip where Ranger had hit, the other balled into a fist the size of a small ham. He looked at Colton. He looked at the dog. He looked at Trent sitting in the snow like a child who'd wandered into a war. "Who the hell are you?" Griggs asked. Colton didn't answer. He whistled once, short, sharp, and Ranger disengaged immediately, circling back to Colton's left side without taking his eyes off Griggs. The two of them stood together in the dark, man and dog, breathing evenly, while everything around them fell apart. Griggs made his choice. He turned and ran. Not toward the trees, toward the road, away from the fight, away from Nathan, away from whatever this night had become. His boots pounded the packed snow, and the sound faded quickly, swallowed by distance and wind. Colton let him go. One less problem. And the man's retreat told him something important. Griggs wasn't loyal. He was hired. When the cost exceeded the paycheck, he did exactly what hired men do. He looked at Trent. The kid hadn't moved. Tears ran down his face and froze on his chin. "How old are you?" Colton asked. 28. "You know what Nathan did tonight?" Trent nodded. The motion was jerky, mechanical. "Say it." He burned the cabin, with her inside." "And you knew?" Trent's face crumpled. "I knew about the fires, the insurance jobs. I didn't know he was going to kill anyone. He said it was just property. He said nobody gets hurt. He said what men like him always say," Colton finished. "And you believed it because believing was easier than looking." Trent sobbed once. Ugly. Real. The sound of a man meeting himself for the first time and hating the introduction. "Where's Nathan now?" Colton asked. Trent wiped his face with his sleeve. "He went east, along the ridge. He said he knew where you'd go because there's only one route to high ground from the cabin. He's been hunting this area for 15 years. He knows every trail." "Is he alone?" "Yes. Griggs and I were supposed to hold the road." Colton processed it. Nathan alone on the ridge, moving east, thinking he was the hunter, not knowing that the phone was already gone, that his leverage had evaporated while he was chasing shadows. "Get up," Colton told Trent. "Walk south. Follow the logging road until you hit pavement. When you get to a gas station or a house, you call the state police. Not the sheriff's department, state police. You tell them everything. Every fire, every name, every dollar." Trent stared at him. "He'll kill me." "He'll try. But if you talk first, you're a witness. If you stay quiet, you're an accomplice. And accomplices burn right alongside the evidence." The kid got up. His legs barely held him. He looked at Colton one more time, mouth opening, searching for something. Gratitude, maybe. Or absolution. Or just permission to be the scared kid he actually was, instead of the man Nathan had pretended he could become. Colton gave him nothing. Some debts couldn't be forgiven in the dark. Trent turned and walked south. His footsteps grew faint, then gone. Colton moved back to Elena. She was exactly where he'd left her, spine against stone, eyes bright with a particular fire that comes from refusing to break when breaking would be easier. He held up her phone. Something crossed her face. Relief, rage, hope, grief. All of it at once, compressed into a single exhale that fogged the air between them. 11%, Colton said. Enough for one call, maybe two. Choose carefully. Elena took the phone. Her hands were steadier than they had any right to be. She powered it on, and the screen's glow painted her face in pale blue. "I know exactly who to call," she said. But before she could dial, Ranger's head snapped east. His body went rigid. A low growl built in his throat. The deep one. The one that meant the threat wasn't distant anymore. A voice cut through the wind. Calm. Conversational. Almost friendly. "Elena." Nathan Hale stepped out of the darkness 30 yards away. No rush. No weapon raised. Just a man walking toward them, with the confidence of someone who had always controlled the ending. "I was hoping you'd come to the road," he said. "Saves me the trouble." Colton stepped in front of Elena. Ranger shifted to his left flank. 3 heartbeats stood between the night and whatever came next. Nathan smiled. "You must be the Good Samaritan," he said, eyes finding Colton. "You look like someone who used to matter." Colton's hand found the recorder in his pocket. His thumb pressed record. "Keep talking," Colton said quietly. "Please." Nathan stood 30 yards out and didn't move closer. That was the part that scared Colton most. A man who rushes is desperate. A man who waits is calculating. Nathan Hale was calculating. "You know what I can't figure out?" Nathan said, voice easy, almost friendly. "I ran every scenario. Weather, timing, accelerant ratio. I even checked the wind charts to make sure the smoke would drift west, away from the highway. And in none of those scenarios was there a stranger with a German shepherd sitting on a porch 2 miles away at 1 in the morning. Colton said nothing. The recorder was warm against his thumb. "So I'm curious," Nathan continued. "What's your story? Hunter? Drifter? One of those broken military types who lives in the woods because Walmart parking lots give you panic attacks?" "Keep talking," Colton said again. Quieter this time. Almost welcoming. Nathan tilted his head. His blue eyes caught a sliver of moonlight. "You want me to talk? That's interesting. Usually the people I deal with want me to stop." Behind Colton, Elena powered on her phone. He heard the faint chime and knew Nathan heard it too. Nathan's gaze shifted to the glow behind Colton's shoulder, and for the first time, his composure flickered. "Is that—" Nathan stopped. His hand moved toward his coat. "Where did you get that?" "Your glove box," Colton said. "Nice false bottom. Elena told me about it." Nathan's jaw clenched. The muscles worked once, twice, like he was chewing a word he refused to swallow. He looked past Colton to Elena. "You went through my truck." "You set me on fire," Elena answered. Her voice was raw, but absolutely level. "I think we're past property boundaries, Nathan." Something shifted in Nathan's posture. Not panic. Men like him didn't panic. But recalculation. Colton could see it happening in real time. The plan had been clean. Burn the cabin, burn Elena, scatter the evidence. But the cabin was ash, and Elena was alive. And her phone was in her hand, and a stranger with military training was standing between them, with a dog that had already proven it would fight. Every variable had moved. Nathan was solving a new equation. "Griggs?" Nathan called over his shoulder. No answer. "Trent?" Nothing. The wind carried the names away and brought back silence. "They're gone," Colton said. "Griggs ran. Trent is walking to the highway to call state police."
Not your sheriff's office. State.
Nathan's eyes narrowed. The calm didn't break, but it bent. Colton watched the man's hand hover near his coat. The service weapon was there, had to be, and calculated distance, angle, time. 30 yards. In the snow, even a trained shooter needed 2 seconds to draw, aim, and fire. Colton needed 1.5 to close distance. Ranger needed less. But Nathan didn't draw. Instead, he laughed. Short, bitter, almost impressed. "State police," he repeated. "You think that changes something? I've got people in that office too. Not many, but enough. Enough to lose paperwork. Enough to delay warrants. Enough to make a smoke inhalation victim sound confused, and a drifter with a dog sound unstable." "Maybe," Elena said from behind Colton. He heard her fingers working the phone screen. "But you don't have people in the federal building." Nathan went still. "I've got 6 years of fires on this phone, Nathan. Dates, addresses, payout amounts."
I've got photos of your contractors' trucks parked at properties 2 days before they burned.
I've got text messages between adjusters that use code words a first-year prosecutor could break in an hour. And as of 30 seconds ago, I've got all of it uploading to a server that you can't burn down. She was bluffing. Colton knew it. 11% battery, no cell signal this deep in the forest. But Nathan didn't know it. And the best lies were built from true materials. Nathan's hand dropped from his coat. Not surrender, reassessment. He stared at Elena with an expression Colton had seen before. On the faces of men who realized the person they underestimated was always the most dangerous one in the room. 18 months, Nathan said softly. 18 months you sat across from me in that squad car, ate lunch at my kitchen table, met my kids, and the whole time you were building a case. The whole time you were burning houses, Elena replied, with families inside.
No one was supposed to be inside.
That was the rule. The Ramirez family, 4 people, 2 of them children. Nathan flinched. It was small, a contraction around his eyes, a tightening of his throat. But it was real. Colton saw it and understood. Nathan wasn't a monster. He was something worse. A man who had drawn a line, crossed it, drawn another, crossed that too, and kept drawing and crossing until the lines meant nothing, and the distance between who he was and who he'd become was measured in body bags. That was an accident, Nathan said. His voice had changed, thinner. They weren't supposed to be there. The property was listed as vacant. The owner confirmed. The owner lied to collect the insurance, Elena cut in. And you didn't check, because checking would have cost you the payout. Nathan closed his eyes.
3 seconds. When he opened them, the calculation was back, colder than before. "None of that matters if you don't make it out of this forest," he said.
Colton stepped forward. 1 step. Just enough to close the conversation's distance, without closing the physical one. "There's a recorder in my pocket," Colton said. "It's been running since you opened your mouth. You just admitted to burning properties and having people inside offices to lose paperwork. You want to add a threat against a state police investigator to the collection?" Nathan stared at him, and for the first time, real fear moved through the deputy's face. Not fear of violence, fear of sound, of his own voice played back in a courtroom where charm couldn't reach. "Who are you?" Nathan asked. The question was different now, not dismissive, desperate. "Nobody," Colton said. "Just a broken military type who lives in the woods." Nathan drew. The pistol came out fast, smooth, practiced, the motion of a man who had trained at the range every Thursday for 15 years. He brought it up in a two-handed grip and sighted center mass, and his finger found the trigger. Ranger was faster. The dog launched from Colton's left side without a sound. No bark, no warning growl. Pure action. 70 pounds of muscle and purpose hitting Nathan's forearm at exactly the angle that turned an aimed weapon into a wild one. The gun fired. The shot cracked across the open space and buried itself in a tree trunk 20 feet wide of anyone. Nathan hit the ground. Ranger clamped his forearm and held, not mauling, not tearing, just holding. The way he'd been trained to hold a threat in place until his handler gave the next command. Nathan screamed and tried to roll. Ranger adjusted his weight and pressed harder. The pistol fell into the snow. Colton reached them in 4 strides. He kicked the gun away, planted a knee on Nathan's back, and pinned him flat. Nathan bucked once, hard. Colton absorbed it and pressed down until the fight left the man's body, and all that remained was breathing and rage and the slow understanding of how small the world had become.
"Get off me," Nathan snarled. "I'm a deputy sheriff. This is assault on a—" "You're a man who tied a woman to a bed and set her on fire," Colton said. His voice was the quietest it had been all night. "Your badge doesn't mean what you think it means. Not anymore." He pulled the recorder from his pocket and held it near Nathan's face. "Say it," Colton said. "Say what you did." "Go to hell." The Ramirez family, the Calloway property, the adjuster payments, the cabin tonight. Say it. Nathan turned his head and spat snow. "You think a recording from some vagrant holds up in court? I think a confession holds up anywhere, and I think you know it. That's why you're scared." Nathan laughed. Ugly. Wet. The sound of a man who had run out of moves, but couldn't admit it. "You don't know what you've walked into. This isn't one deputy with a gas can. This is years. Contractors, adjusters, county officials. You pull this thread, and half the county unravels." "Good.
People will lose jobs, pensions, families. 4 people lost their lives," Elena said. She stood above them now. Colton hadn't heard her approach. She looked down at Nathan, not with triumph, not with hatred, but with something more devastating. Clarity. The look of a woman who had finally seen her partner in full light and was done mourning the version of him that never existed. "The Ramirez children were 6 and 9, she said. "Alejandro and Sofia. I memorized their names the day I opened the file. Did you?" Nathan didn't answer. His jaw clenched and his eyes went somewhere far away, somewhere the questions couldn't follow. Colton recognized the retreat. He'd done it himself, sent his mind to a safe room while the world demanded answers he didn't have. But Colton wasn't going to let him hide there. "We burned properties," Colton prompted, pressing the recorder closer. "That's what you said 5 minutes ago. Finish it,
Nathan's breath came ragged.
Snow melted against his face. Ranger held his arm with patient, absolute pressure.
"Claims paid," Nathan said. The words fell out like something breaking. "Evidence disappeared. People who asked questions got unlucky. The house tonight was supposed to finish it. I've got adjusters on payroll. Contractors who demolish before investigators arrive. 2 deputies who process paperwork without reading it." "Names," Colton said. "Griggs handles the labor. Trent watches perimeters. Dave Kohler at Northwest Mutual signs off on claims. Ray Pena at County handles the permits. And my sergeant—" Nathan stopped. Something crossed his face. The last wall. "Your sergeant," Elena repeated. "Sergeant Bill Driscoll. He takes 20% and makes sure the night shift doesn't ask questions." Elena exhaled. The sound carried 18 months of work, 18 months of doubt, 18 months of wondering if she was crazy or if the world around her was. She wasn't crazy. She had never been crazy.
And now she had proof that couldn't burn.
A siren cut the distance, faint, warped by wind, but unmistakable. Then another, coming from the south, where the highway met the forest access road, where a scared kid named Trent had walked with shaking legs and a conscience that had finally outweighed his fear. From the east, a light appeared through the trees. Then another. Headlights bouncing along the logging road, followed by the flash of red and blue strobes slicing through the dark. Colton looked at Elena. She looked back. Neither of them smiled. It was too soon for that, and they both knew it. But something passed between them, an acknowledgement that the worst was behind them, and the hard part was about to begin. A voice called from the tree line, female, authoritative, carrying the calm of someone who had pulled people out of bad places before. "This is Ranger Diane Kowalski, Washington State Parks. Drop everything and show me your hands." Colton lifted his hands slowly.
Elena did the same. Ranger held Nathan's arm for 2 more seconds, long enough to make a point, then released at Colton's quiet command and sat beside him. Blood from the bark scratch dried along his shoulder, eyes still burning with the steady fire of a soldier who had done his job and knew it. Nathan lay face down in the snow. His confession sat in Colton's pocket, warm and permanent, and absolutely unforgiving. The sirens grew louder, the lights grew closer, and the night that was supposed to end in ash and silence ended instead with voices and truth, and a dog who wouldn't leave his partner's side. Diane Kowalski secured Nathan with hands that had done this before and didn't need to think about it. She zip-tied his wrists behind his back, checked the tension once, and left him face down in the snow without ceremony. Then she looked at Colton. "Who's hurt?" "She is," Colton said, nodding toward Elena. "Smoke inhalation, dislocated shoulder, rope burns on both wrists." Diane's gray eyes moved to Elena, assessed her in 2 seconds flat, then came back to Colton.
"And you?" "I'm fine." "You're bleeding."
Colton looked down. A cut across his forearm he hadn't felt. Adrenaline's bill, arriving late. "I'm fine," he said again. Diane didn't argue. She keyed her radio and called for medical and additional units, giving coordinates with the precision of someone who knew this forest by heart. Behind her, more headlights climbed the logging road. 2 state patrol cruisers and an ambulance that fishtailed twice on the ice before finding traction. Nathan hadn't spoken since the zip ties. He lay still, cheek pressed into the snow, eyes open and staring at nothing. Colton recognized the look. A man watching his future collapse in real time and not finding a single handhold to stop the slide. Elena sat on the tailgate of Nathan's own truck, a detail that carried its own justice, while a paramedic checked her vitals. Her oxygen levels were low. Her shoulder needed imaging, but she refused the stretcher, and she refused to leave until she'd said what she needed to say.
"I want to speak with whoever's running this," she told Diane. "That would be me, for now," Diane answered.
Elena held up her phone. The screen was dark. The battery had finally died during the arrest. But it had lived long enough.
"Everything is on this phone. 18 months of investigation. Fires, payouts, names, connections. I need it powered up and imaged before anyone from the sheriff's department touches it."
Diane studied her for a long moment. "You're saying this goes inside the department?"
"I'm saying this goes to the top of the department. Nathan's sergeant, Bill Driscoll, takes 20% of every payout. Nathan confessed it on a recording that this man is carrying."
Every eye turned to Colton. He reached into his pocket and held up the recorder. Small, black, still running. He pressed stop. "I'd like that handled as evidence," Elena said to Diane. "Chain of custody, documented transfer, state police only." Diane took the recorder from Colton with a nod that carried the weight of trust earned in the last 5 minutes, not given by default. She listened to 10 seconds through an earpiece, closed her eyes, then opened them with the expression of a woman who had just heard exactly how deep the hole went. "I'll make the call," Diane said. "Federal. Tonight." Nathan spoke from the ground. His voice was muffled by snow and something heavier. "It won't matter." Everyone looked at him. "You think this ends with me?" He craned his neck to find Elena. "I'm a deputy. Driscoll's a sergeant. But the adjusters answer to corporate. The contractors have LLCs layered 3 deep. You pull me out, and someone else fills the hole by Tuesday." Elena slid off the tailgate. The paramedic reached for her. She waved him off. She walked to Nathan and stood over him. And when she spoke, her voice was steady enough to carry a verdict. "Then I'll pull them out too. One by one. Every name on that phone. Every dollar in every account. Every signature on every fraudulent claim. I don't care if it takes another 18 months or 18 years. Nathan stared up at her. "You'll make enemies." "I already did," Elena said. "The night you decided I was a loose end instead of a partner." She turned and walked back to the ambulance. She didn't look at Nathan again. She didn't need to. Some conversations end not with a final word, but with a final step. And Elena's step said everything her voice didn't. That the woman he'd tied to a bed and left to burn was going to dismantle his world with the same patience he'd used to build it. Colton watched from the edge of it all. He'd moved there without thinking, the way he always moved to perimeters, comfortable in the margin, useful from the outside. Ranger sat at his heel, frost melting from his coat in small drips, shoulder wound crusted but clean. The dog watched the commotion with the calm of a soldier who understood that the loudest part of any operation is the aftermath. A hand touched Colton's arm. He turned. "Elena." "The paramedic wants me to go to the hospital," she said. "You should." "I know." She paused. "I didn't ask your name." "Colton. Colton Briggs." "Elena Voss. But you knew that." "I did." She looked at Ranger. The dog looked back with amber eyes that held no judgment and no expectation. Just presence. Elena knelt slowly, favoring her shoulder, and placed her hand on the dog's head. Ranger leaned into her palm. "He saved my life," Elena said. "Both of you did. But he went in first." Colton almost smiled. "He usually does." Elena stood. The ambulance lights painted her face in alternating red and white. She looked older than she had in the cabin, and younger than she had in the forest.
She looked like a woman who had survived something that was supposed to be unsurvivable, and was only beginning to understand what that meant.
"Will you be here?" she asked. "When the federal people come? They'll need your statement."
"I'll be here." She nodded and let the paramedic guide her to the ambulance. At the doors, she stopped and looked back one more time.
"Colton."
"Yeah?"
"Thank you for not walking away."
He held her gaze. "I almost did."
"But you didn't."
The ambulance doors closed, the engine started, and Colton stood in the dark with his dog and watched the lights disappear down the logging road, carrying the woman who had refused to let the truth die, even when the truth was trying to kill her. The federal investigator arrived at dawn. Her name was Grace Harmon. Iron gray hair, cut short by choice. Pale skin, eyes that missed nothing. She took Colton's statement in the cab of a state patrol truck, asking questions that were sharp enough to cut and patient enough to let the answers bleed completely before moving to the next one. When she finished, she sat back and looked at him.
"You're a Navy SEAL," she said, not a question.
"Was."
"Discharged 11 months ago. 3 deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart you never picked up."
Colton said nothing.
"The dog was yours in service?"
"He was his own. I just held the leash."
Grace almost smiled. Almost. "You know what you did tonight will put you in depositions for months. Defense attorneys will come after your mental health records, your discharge status, every nightmare you've ever reported to a VA counselor."
"I know."
"And you'll do it anyway."
The woman was tied to a bed in a burning house. The man who did it wore a badge. Yes, I'll do it anyway. Grace studied him a moment longer, then nodded once.
"I'll be in touch, Mr. Briggs."
She left. Colton sat alone in the truck cab for a long time. Ranger waited outside, patient, watching the door handle, as if guarding it from the past. The arrests unfolded over the following weeks, with the slow, relentless precision of water cutting stone. Nathan Hale was charged with attempted murder, arson, insurance fraud, and obstruction. Sergeant Bill Driscoll was arrested at his home on a Tuesday morning, still in his bathrobe, coffee in hand, face blank, with a particular shock of a man who believed the walls would never close. Dave Kohler, at Northwest Mutual, was indicted alongside Ray Pina at the county permits office. Griggs was found at a motel in Idaho. He didn't run. He sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I was wondering when you'd come." Trent, the kid who had walked to the highway with shaking legs and a conscience, became the state's key witness. He testified for 3 days. He cried twice. The jury believed him both times. Elena transferred to Internal Affairs. Her request was approved within a week, which told her everything she needed to know about how badly the department wanted someone willing to do the job no one else wanted. "If rot grows in the dark," she told Grace Harmon the day the transfer went through, "someone has to keep the lights on." Grace looked at her evenly. "You'll make more enemies." "Good," Elena said. "It means I'm looking in the right places." The cabin where Elena had been left to die was reduced to a field of charcoal and warped nails. Investigators mapped every inch. What fire had tried to erase, paper and witness restored. The phone Elena had fought to protect became a ledger that opened 6 years of criminal history. The recorder Colton had carried became the hinge the entire case turned on. Colton went home. He walked the 2 miles back to his cabin with Ranger at his side, the dog's gait slower than it used to be, but certain in a way that speed could never replace. He fixed a cracked window frame with wood he'd split himself. He stacked kindling. He swept the floor. He left the lamp burning longer than he used to. Not because he feared the dark,
but because he no longer needed to disappear into it. Ranger lay near the hearth, joints easing, eyes half closed but alert. The posture of a guardian who had finally learned when vigilance could rest. Elena came back 3 weeks later. The snow had begun to retreat from the south-facing slopes. She walked without the sling. Her color had returned. She wore a simple jacket, no insignia, and she carried 2 cups of coffee from the gas station in town. Ranger rose when she entered. He touched his nose to hers, a recognition renewed without urgency. His tail moved once, restrained, professional. She scratched behind his bent ear, and he leaned into her hand. They sat at Colton's table and drank coffee in silence. Not the empty kind, the kind that held meaning without demanding words.
"The trial starts in April," Elena said eventually. "I know," Grace called. "You'll have to testify." "I know that too." She looked around the cabin, small, worn, honest. "You could have stayed out of it," she said. "That night. You heard the crash, you smelled the smoke, and you could have closed the door and gone back to your coffee." Colton looked past the window. Meltwater fed small streams that stitched the hillside together, carrying winter away, one trickle at a time. "I tried that," he said, "for 11 months, closing doors, turning away, telling myself that silence was the same thing as peace." He paused. Ranger knew better. He always does. Elena smiled. The first real one he'd seen from her. It changed her entire face. Not softer, but fuller. Like a window that had been shut for a long time, finally letting light through. "You could have left," she said. "I did leave," Colton answered. "I left everything. The teams, the mission, the people I was supposed to protect." He looked at Ranger. The dog met his eyes with the patience of 7 years and 3 wars, and 1 long winter that had almost won. Coming back was the hard part. Elena nodded. She understood. Healing didn't always mean returning to noise. Sometimes it meant staying where the work of listening could finish. She left as fresh snow began to fall, soft, clean, covering old tracks and making room for new ones. Colton stood in the doorway with Ranger at his side and watched the flakes settle on the ground where boot prints had been, writing a future that didn't need him to run. He reached down and rested his hand on Ranger's head. The dog leaned into him, warm, steady, present. "Good boy," Colton said. Ranger's tail thumped once against the doorframe. That was enough. Sometimes the miracle is not the fire stopping, or the storm passing, or the danger vanishing before it reaches us. Sometimes the miracle is that someone is placed in our path at the exact moment we cannot save ourselves. A stranger who refuses to walk away. A loyal companion who stands guard when every reason to quit has already been given. A truth that survives the very flames meant to destroy it. In our own lives, we face nights like that forest. Moments when everything feels planned against us. When silence weighs more than fear. When hope feels too small to hold. Yet again and again, God proves the same quiet truth. He does not always remove the fire, but He never abandons those inside it. He sends help disguised as ordinary courage and loyalty and love. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may be standing in their own storm tonight. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Your words may be the encouragement someone else has been praying for. And if you believe in stories of faith, resilience, and quiet miracles, subscribe so we can keep sharing hope together. May God bless you and your family. May He protect those who walk beside you, human and loyal companion alike. And may you always remember,
even on your hardest night, that no darkness is ever beyond his reach.